It doesn't sound like you think it will. No explosion, no warning siren, just a low groan, like the earth clearing its throat, and then an entire building where people were sleeping, cooking, living, breathing is gone. Cairo, September 2022. Hisar el Suez District. A 12-story residential block collapses in under 4 seconds. Not because of an earthquake, not because of a storm, because someone, somewhere, decided that a foundation built for 6 floors could hold 12. And then somebody else decided to look the other way. This isn't a freak accident. This is a business model. To understand what happened in Cairo, what keeps happening in Cairo, you need to understand one number. 90%. That's the estimated proportion of buildings constructed in Egypt that are either partially or entirely illegal. Not poorly built, not just cutting corners. Illegal. Structures that never should have been approved, never should have been occupied, and in many cases, never should have been touched after the original build. For decades, Egypt's population exploded faster than its housing supply could follow. Cairo went from 7 million people in 1980 to over 20 million today. Families needed somewhere to live. Developers saw opportunity. And officials, the ones whose one job was to make sure those buildings were safe, saw something else entirely. They saw a second income. The informal housing system in Egypt works like this. A developer buys a plot of land, gets approval, legitimate approval, for a 6-story building. Then construction starts, and somewhere around floor 7, it just keeps going. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Every floor above the permitted limit is money in the developer's pocket. Apartments rented out, often to families who have no idea the floor they're sleeping on was never meant to exist. And the inspectors? They come, they see, they leave richer than they arrived. The families who moved in, working-class Egyptians, many of them, weren't told any of this. They were told it was a home. That's all anyone needs to hear. Buildings don't collapse without warning. They talk, loudly, if you know how to listen. Cracks appear in walls. Floors begin to lean, subtly at first, then obviously. Doors that used to close properly stop closing. Residents complain to building managers. Building managers smile and say it's settling. Normal. Nothing to worry about. In the years before the Jess or El Suez collapse, neighbors reported visible cracks in the structure. A civil engineer who lived nearby later told local media he'd flagged concerns to the district office twice. Twice he was ignored. He wasn't alone. Across Cairo's informal neighborhoods, Ain Shams, Madaria, Helwan, residents have been raising alarms for years. Local journalists try to cover it. Occasionally a story would run. Then the news cycle moved on and nothing changed. Because here's what happened to the people who pushed hardest. Nothing good. Complaints got buried. Inspectors who refused bribes found themselves reassigned or passed over for promotion. One housing official who tried to escalate illegal construction reports in his district was quietly transferred. His replacement was more cooperative. The system didn't fail to stop this. The system was specifically designed to allow it. It's just afternoon on a weekday. Some residents are home. Others are at work, at school, at the market. Fatima, not her real name, a composite of multiple survivor accounts, is on the 4th floor making lunch for her 2 children when the walls begin to shudder. She thinks it's a truck, a heavy one. Then the ceiling drops. For seconds, the entire structure pancakes, each floor slamming down onto the one below it, compressing lives and concrete into a single irreversible moment. Rescue workers arrive, then more, then volunteers with bare hands and no equipment, because in Egypt's informal neighborhoods, that's often what first response looks like. They dig. They call out. Sometimes something calls back. 25 confirmed dead in that single incident. Dozens more injured. Families who weren't home returned to find their entire world compressed into rubble 6 feet high. And across the city, across the country, the same scene played out again. And again. Between 2021 and 2023, Egypt recorded dozens of significant building collapses. Hundreds of deaths. These aren't natural disasters. These are scheduled ones. Here's what the Egyptian government knew. In 2020, an official audit found that hundreds of thousands of buildings across the country were constructed illegally. Not suspected. Confirmed. The response? A reconciliation law. Developers and property owners could pay a fine, a relatively modest fine, and their illegal structures would be officially forgiven. Legalized on paper, made to look compliant without changing a single brick. Think about what that means. You built something dangerous. People moved in. The government found out. And instead of making you tear it down, they charged you a fee and stamped it approved. The money from those fines? It went into government coffers, which means the Egyptian state was, in practice, financially incentivized to let illegal buildings stand. Meanwhile, the local officials taking bribes to approve extra floors. Many of them were never investigated. Some were promoted. A handful were arrested in high-profile crackdowns right after a collapse, held up to cameras as evidence that justice was happening. Most were quietly released or given suspended sentences within months. One developer connected to a collapsed building in Alexandria in 2021 was detained for 2 weeks. His project partner continued operating. By 2023, new construction had already begun on an adjacent plot. The machine didn't skip a beat. Let's talk about what the numbers actually mean. 25 dead in one collapse, 40 in another, 60 across 3 incidents in a single year. And those are the recorded ones. In a country where informal settlements often don't have reliable civil registration, where some of the dead are migrant workers with no official address, where families sometimes choose not to report because they're afraid of what the investigation might uncover about their own housing situation. Mohammed Hassan was 44. He was a taxi driver. He'd spent 7 years saving to afford that apartment. His wife and daughter survived because they were visiting relatives that day. He did not survive because he went back to get his phone charger. His daughter is 11. She now lives with her grandmother in a single room in Giza. Khaled, a widow in her 60s, had lived in her building for 22 years. Her son had been born there. Her husband had died there. When it collapsed, she lost everything. Furniture, documents, photographs, her husband's grave goods she'd been keeping in a box under the bed. They gave her temporary housing, a prefab unit on the edge of the city, and told her to be grateful. She told a local reporter, "I don't want compensation. I want someone to say they're sorry. I'm still waiting." She's still waiting. After each major collapse, the pattern is identical. First, rescue operations and visible grief. Second, arrests, usually the building owner, sometimes a contractor, occasionally a low-level inspector. Third, a government statement promising reform, stricter enforcement, a new commission. Then quiet. The 2021 to 2023 collapse wave prompted the Egyptian government to announce a national database of dangerous buildings and a new demolition program for unsafe structures. Some demolitions did happen. They were photographed extensively. What didn't happen? Systematic prosecution of the bribery networks that enabled the buildings to go up in the first place. No senior official has been convicted. No ministerial accountability. No independent investigation with real enforcement power. The reconciliation law framework? Still in place. In 2023, Egypt passed new housing regulations that, on paper, tighten oversight. Enforcement is predictably patchy. In informal neighborhoods, construction continues. Floors are still being added to buildings that cannot hold them. Inspectors still come and go. The fine is just a cost of doing business. And the business is still open. We talk about corruption like it's an abstraction, a political problem, something for economists and policy papers. But in Cairo, in dozens of cities like across the world, corruption has a specific physical weight. It's measured in floors. 6 permitted, 12 built, 25 dead. And here's the question nobody in power wants you to ask. If a government finds a developer for building something dangerous, and the dangerous building is still standing, who exactly did that fine protect? Not Fatima's children, not Mohammed's daughter, not Khaled, still waiting for an apology in her prefab unit on the edge of a city that ate her life and called it an accident. The building didn't fall because of bad luck. It was built to fall, and someone got paid to make sure it would.